Distraction was always a problem. We've known this for years. There are books about it, podcasts about it, entire productivity systems built around it. The advice has been around so long, it almost sounds boring. So here's the uncomfortable part. It doesn't matter that you know. Because the problem has changed shape, and the old framing is making you underestimate it. For most of the last decade, distraction was a productivity issue. You got less done. You felt scattered. You fixed it with a better morning routine or a website blocker and moved on. But something has shifted. AI is now handling more of the routine work, the scheduling, the first drafts, the data sorting, the basic research. The tasks that used to fill a workday are being compressed or automated. What's left behind are the things that actually require your brain to be present. Judgment calls, creative thinking, reading a room, making a call with incomplete information. The jobs that remain are the ones that demand deep attention. And the attention economy, the entire infrastructure of apps, feeds, and platforms built to capture your focus, has not slowed down. It has accelerated. So here's the question this video is going to answer. In a world where AI does the easy work, what exactly does it cost you to be chronically distracted? This is not a video for people who want to be more productive in a general sense. This is specifically for people in their 20s and early 30s who are building their careers right now in roles that involve communication, analysis, strategy, design, writing, or any kind of complex decision-making. If that's you, then your core professional asset, the thing that makes you valuable, is your ability to think clearly and work through hard problems. Not quickly, clearly. That capacity is not fixed. It can compound over time, the way any skill does, but it can also erode, gradually, quietly, in ways that are almost invisible until someone is making a judgment call about your work, and you can't quite hold the thread. The stakes here are not dramatic. No one loses a career in a single distracted week. But the gap between someone whose attention is intact and someone whose attention is fragmented compounds over years. And in a market where AI is raising the floor on what's good enough, that gap matters more than it used to. There's a number worth sitting with. A Microsoft study from a few years ago suggested that the average worker switches tasks between apps, documents, conversations, roughly 300 times per day. Some estimates put the figure higher now, and the research on what that costs is consistent. It takes an average of around 23 minutes to fully return to a task after an interruption. You do not need to accept those numbers as exact. The point isn't precision. The point is the pattern. If you are switching contexts dozens of times a day, and most people are, you are rarely, if ever, in a state of full cognitive presence on any single problem. You are always partially somewhere else. And here's what's changed. For much of the last 20 years, that was tolerable, because a lot of the work itself didn't require full presence. Email could be written in a scattered state. Reports had templates. Routine analysis had a process you followed. AI is eating those tasks. What it's leaving behind, and what employers increasingly need from human workers, is the kind of thinking that only happens when you're fully in. Judgment. Synthesis. Navigation through ambiguity. The attention economy is getting worse, and the work is requiring more of your attention at exactly the same time. That's the collision this video is about. To understand how this actually works, not just as a vague problem, but as a mechanism, you need to understand 4 linked steps. Step 1. The engagement infrastructure, the apps on your phone, and the platforms in your browser are not neutral tools. They are products engineered by some of the most sophisticated behavioral design teams in history, with one goal: to keep you returning, and to keep you there as long as possible. This isn't a conspiracy. It's a business model. Attention is the inventory. Every notification, every autoplay, every infinite scroll, every red badge, every algorithmic feed is a mechanism for capturing and holding your focus. Because captured attention can be sold to advertisers. This system has been building for roughly 15 years, and it has gotten significantly better at what it does. The models that predict what content will hold you longest are more accurate. The feedback loops are tighter. The friction to disengage is lower. You are not fighting a bad habit. You are fighting a system that has more data about your psychology than you do, and that is updated continuously. Now that you understand what you're up against, here's why that matters for your cognitive capacity. Step 2. The threshold effect on deep work. There's a concept in cognitive science sometimes called depth of processing. It refers to how deeply your brain encodes and engages with information. Surface-level engagement, scrolling, skimming, reacting, produces weak encoding. Deep engagement, sustained focus on a difficult problem, produces stronger neural connections, better retention, and more flexible thinking. Here's the threshold effect. The ability to do deep work is not just a matter of willpower in the moment. It's a capacity that requires regular exercise to maintain. Think of it like physical endurance. If you stop running, you don't just get slower. Your cardiovascular baseline drops. The work itself becomes harder. The same thing happens with sustained attention. If your default mode, outside of forced work time, is constant low-depth engagement, your capacity for high-depth thinking degrades over time. Not dramatically, not quickly, but measurably. The threshold for when deep work feels hard gets lower. Problems that used to feel tractable start to feel overwhelming. The discomfort of holding complexity for more than a few minutes increases. Most people attribute this to stress or burnout. Sometimes it is, but often it's a trained fragmentation of attention. Step 3. The invisible confidence gap. Here's where most people get stuck. The effects of chronic distraction aren't visible in any single piece of work. They show up in the quality of your judgment over time, in the depth of thinking you bring to hard problems, in your ability to sit with ambiguity without reaching for the easier answer. These are things you rarely get direct feedback on. No one tells you that decision was shallower than it could have been. The signal is too faint and too delayed. What you do notice, if you're paying attention, is a subtle erosion of confidence in your own thinking. A growing sense that your mind doesn't quite do what you ask it to. A preference for the tasks that feel manageable over the ones that don't. An increasing reliance on frameworks and shortcuts instead of original thinking. That's the invisible gap. And it is a career gap, because the people around you who have maintained their attention capacity are compounding differently. They hold complex problems longer. They make better calls under pressure. They produce work that has a quality of clarity and judgment that is hard to name but easy to recognize. In an environment where AI handles the baseline work, that gap is increasingly the entire game. Step 4. The AI amplification effect. Now, step back for a moment and look at the bigger picture. AI tools are entering the workflow. That's real, and it's accelerating. And one of the things they're very good at is producing coherent-looking output quickly. A draft, an analysis, a summary, a slide. For someone whose attention is fragmented, AI tools feel like a solution. The hard thinking is offloaded. The output looks fine. The gap is papered over. But consider what happens over time. If your role is to produce judgment, to take AI output and assess whether it's right, to catch what it missed, to make the call it can't, then a fragmented attention state is not just a personal productivity problem. It is a professional liability. Because the skill you're being paid for is the quality of your judgment, and you're practicing that skill less while leaning on AI to compensate. The people who will use AI best are the ones who come to it with their full capacity intact, who can evaluate what it produces, direct it well, and catch the places where it is confidently wrong. That requires a mind that can hold complexity, not a mind that has outsourced complexity to reduce discomfort. The attention economy isn't just competing with your focus. In an AI era, it's quietly degrading the very thing that makes you irreplaceable. Think about what this looks like at the individual level. 5 years from now. For the person who doesn't see this, you've kept up with the tools. You've learned the prompts. Your output looks competent. But over time, you've drifted toward using AI to avoid the hard thinking rather than to accelerate it. Your context-switching habits have never really changed. You scroll the same way, check the same feeds, feel the same low-grade pull toward distraction. You get the work done. But when the genuinely hard problems land, the ones that require extended thinking, original framing, judgment in the face of ambiguity, you feel a resistance you can't quite explain. You produce something adequate. You wonder why it felt so difficult. You don't have a name for what's eroded. But it's there. For the person who understood this early, you treated your attention as a professional asset and managed it accordingly. Not with rigid systems or extreme habits, just consistently. You maintained the capacity for deep work, the way an athlete maintains baseline fitness. Not dramatically, but reliably. When AI tools arrived in your workflow, you used them well, because you came to them with your judgment intact. You could tell when the output was wrong. You could direct it with clarity. You could catch what it missed. You got harder to replace, not because you resisted AI, but because the thing you brought that AI couldn't replicate, quality of thinking, had been quietly compounding while everyone else was letting it drift. That's the divergence. It doesn't announce itself. It accumulates. One mental model that reframes this cleanly: your attention has a resting state. Most productivity advice focuses on what you do during focused work. The blocks, the timers, the deep work sessions. That's real. But it misses the more important variable, which is the quality of your cognitive baseline when you're not actively trying to focus. Think of it this way. If you spent 8 hours a day training for a marathon, but also spent your non-training time slowly poisoning your lungs, the training would be fighting a losing battle. Your default state matters more than your intentional focus state, because you're in your default state most of the time. The relevant question is not, how long can I focus when I try? It's, what is my attention doing when I'm not thinking about it? If the honest answer is moving between feeds, checking notifications, drifting to whatever is most stimulating in the moment, then your cognitive baseline is being shaped by that, continuously. The practical move is not to optimize your focus sessions. It's to raise your resting state. Protect the transitions. The 5 minutes between tasks. The morning before work fully starts. The walk without the podcast. Not as a rule, as a practice, as an environment you design for yourself, so that your default state is something closer to present. That's not a productivity tip. It's an understanding of the underlying system, and a single lever that affects everything else. So, back to the question from the opening. In a world where AI does the easy work, what exactly does it cost you to be chronically distracted? Here's the clear answer. It costs you the thing AI cannot do. The quality of judgment that only comes from a mind that has practiced holding complexity. The routine work is being automated. What remains is harder, and it requires more of you. Distraction was always a productivity problem. In this moment, in this market, it is becoming a competitive disadvantage, quietly, invisibly, in the compound. That's the mechanism. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Which raises the next question, one this video doesn't answer. If your attention is the asset, and the environment is engineered to degrade it, what does it actually look like to protect it? Not with willpower, not with extreme habits, but with a system that works at the level of how your environment is designed. That's the next video.